Kelvos had studied humans for 40 years. He had watched them laugh at simple jokes. He had seen them cry at sad music. He had observed how they held their children close and spoke softly to their pets. In all his 300 years of life, he had never met a species so driven by emotion, so openly vulnerable, so seemingly gentle. He stood now at the observation window of Tessara Station, a diplomatic outpost floating above a neutral world. His long gray fingers pressed against the cold glass as he watched human ships drift past. Small vessels, cargo haulers, family transports carrying settlers to new colonies. Nothing about them suggested danger. The Myrelian government had sent Kelvos here to document humanity's behavior during their first major crisis since joining the Galactic Concord. Everyone expected it to be a minor incident. The Vethrak Dominion had destroyed a human transport ship. 3,000 dead. Tragic. Yes. But these things happened in a galaxy of competing powers. The Concord would mediate. Reparations would be paid. Life would continue. Kelvos had already drafted most of his report. He described how humans would likely respond with formal protests and economic sanctions. Perhaps they would increase military patrols near their borders. They might even demand a public apology from the Vethrak High Council. Standard responses from a civilized species. He was watching a human destroyer called the Steadfast when everything changed. Commander Laura Hayes stood on the bridge of that ship. Kelvos had met her twice before at diplomatic functions. She was a small woman with brown hair turning gray at the temples. She smiled easily and laughed often. She had shown him pictures of her grandchildren once, her eyes bright with love. The communication came through on all channels. Kelvos heard it from his station's speakers at the same moment Commander Hayes heard it on her bridge. A Vethrak battle group had intercepted a human colony transport. The ship was called the New Horizon. It carried 3,000 civilians. Families. Children. Farmers and teachers and doctors heading to start new lives on a distant world. The Vethrak had destroyed it without warning. No survivors. Kelvos watched Commander Hayes through the observation feeds. He expected tears. He expected shock. He expected the kind of emotional collapse he had seen from humans when they received terrible news. What he saw instead made his blood run cold. Commander Hayes did not cry. She did not scream. She did not fall to her knees or call out in anguish. Instead, something in her face simply changed. The warmth drained away like water from a broken vessel. Her eyes, which had always carried such gentle light, went flat and dark. She stood perfectly still for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was quiet, calm, empty. "Get me a channel to Fleet Command." Kelvos had seen many species react to tragedy. The Myrelians wept and composed songs of grief. The Torvani withdrew into meditation. The Krelish demanded immediate vengeance, but calmed quickly. Every species had its patterns, its predictable responses. He had never seen anything like what he saw in Commander Hayes. There was no heat in her anger. No wild emotion demanding release. There was only cold. A terrible, absolute cold that seemed to spread through the bridge as her crew received the same news. One by one, their faces changed in the same way. The light went out of their eyes. Their postures shifted from relaxed to rigid. Lieutenant Danny Kowalski, the young weapons officer Kelvos had seen joking with his crewmates just hours before, checked his console with mechanical precision. His hands moved across the controls as if preparing for something. "Commander," he said, his voice flat. "All weapons systems are at full readiness." "Good," Hayes replied. "Keep them that way." Kelvos felt a strange fear growing in his chest. He had spent 4 decades believing he understood humans. He had written papers about their emotional nature, their attachment to family, their gentle spirits. He had argued to the Concord that humanity posed no threat to galactic stability. Now he watched the Steadfast's crew moving with silent purpose, and he realized he had understood nothing. He opened a communication channel to his government. His hands trembled slightly as he composed the message. "Something is wrong," he wrote. "The humans are not responding as expected. There is no grief, no chaos. They have become something else, something I do not recognize. I am requesting additional observation resources immediately." The response from his superiors was dismissive. Humans were emotional creatures. They would process their grief and return to normal. The Concorde would handle the diplomatic situation. Kelvos should continue his documentation and not worry. But Kelvos could not stop worrying. Over the next several hours, he watched human ships across the sector. The news spread quickly. On every vessel, in every station, the same transformation occurred. Humans who had been laughing and working and living their normal lives received the news and changed. They did not panic. They did not argue or debate. They simply stopped what they were doing, looked at each other with those cold, dead eyes, and began preparing. Preparing for what, Kelvos did not know. But the preparation itself terrified him. He had seen the Torvani prepare for war once. There had been ceremonies and speeches and long debates about honor and necessity. He had watched the Krelish arm themselves with loud boasts and aggressive displays. The humans did none of these things. They simply worked, quietly, efficiently, without a single wasted word or motion. Commander Hayes had not moved from her position on the bridge. She stared out at the stars with those empty eyes, waiting for a response from Fleet Command. When it came, Kelvos managed to intercept part of the transmission. "All commands confirmed," a voice said. "Operation Reckoning is now active. May God forgive us for what we are about to do." Commander Hayes nodded once. "He might," she said softly. "But we won't." The Steadfast's engines flared to life. Around the sector, hundreds of other human ships did the same. They moved with perfect coordination, forming into groups, heading toward predetermined positions. Kelvos sent another message to his government. This one was shorter. "I was wrong about humanity. We all were. Something terrible is coming, and I do not think anyone can stop it. Please listen to me. Please. I was wrong about humanity. Please listen to me." No response came. Kelvos stood alone at his window, watching the human ships disappear into the darkness between stars. He thought about Commander Hayes and her grandchildren. He thought about Lieutenant Kowalski and his easy laughter. He thought about how quickly all of that warmth had vanished, replaced by something ancient and cold and utterly merciless. For the first time in 300 years, Kelvos felt truly afraid. 2 weeks after the destruction of the New Horizon, Kelvos received permission to travel to the Sol system. The Galactic Concorde wanted a first-hand account of humanity's response to the crisis. They expected him to document grief counseling sessions and memorial services. They wanted footage of sad humans lighting candles and singing songs for their dead. What Kelvos found when he arrived at Earth orbit was something entirely different. Ships filled the space around humanity's homeworld. Not the small cargo vessels and civilian transports he had grown accustomed to seeing. These were warships, massive destroyers and carriers and battlecruisers, bristling with weapons that Kelvos had never seen before. Ships that the Concorde had no record of. Ships that should not exist. His transport was directed to a military station where a human liaison officer met him. The officer was polite, but distant. His eyes had that same cold emptiness Kelvos had seen in Commander Hayes. "The Admiral will see you now," the officer said. "Follow me." Admiral Grace Mitchell was a woman of 60 years, with silver hair cut short and a face that looked carved from stone. She stood in a command center, surrounded by holographic displays, showing fleet positions across human space. Hundreds of ship markers blinked on the screens. Thousands. "You're the Morellian observer," she said without looking at him. "Good. I want you to see this. I want you to tell your people what you see, Admiral," Kelvos said carefully. "The Concorde is prepared to mediate this dispute. The Vethrak can be brought to the negotiating table. There is no need for military action." Admiral Mitchell turned to look at him. Her eyes were gray like winter ice. 3,000 people, she said quietly. "That's how many died on the New Horizon. Do you know how many of them were children? 847. Do you know how many families were traveling together to start new lives? All of them. Every single person on that ship had someone who loved them." She turned back to the displays. "The Vethrak killed them for sport. Their admiral broadcast a message laughing about how easy it was. He called our people weak. He said we would file complaints and accept money for our dead, like civilized cowards. The Concorde can ensure justice is served," Kelvos said. "War is not necessary." Admiral Mitchell smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. War became necessary the moment they murdered our children. A door opened, and 2 more humans entered. Senator Paul Hernandez was a heavy man, with tired eyes and a grave expression. Dr. Amy Lynn was younger, with sharp features and hands that never stopped moving. "The fleet is almost ready," Dr. Lynn reported. "All ships have been equipped with the new drive systems. We can reach Vethrak space in hours instead of weeks." Kelvos felt his throat tighten. "That's impossible. No known technology can travel that fast." Dr. Lynn looked at him with something that might have been pity. "We've had this technology for decades. We just never had a reason to use it." "Why would you hide such an advancement from the conquered?" Kelvos demanded. Senator Hernandez answered. "Because we knew this day would come. Not with the Vethrak specifically, but with someone. We've been members of your Concord for 200 years. In that time, we've watched 3 species get conquered by aggressive neighbors. We watched the Concord debate and negotiate while innocent people died. We decided we would never let that happen to us." He gestured at the displays. "Everything you see here, the ships, the weapons, the technology, humanity has been building in secret since we first made contact with the galaxy. We hoped we would never need any of it. We prayed we were being paranoid. And now?" Kelvos asked. "Now the Vethrak have given us a reason to stop hoping and start fighting." Admiral Mitchell pulled up a new display. It showed the Vethrak Dominion's territory, hundreds of systems, dozens of military bases, a fleet that had terrorized this region of space for centuries. "The Vethrak believe they are the strongest power in this sector," she said. "They believe that because no one has ever challenged them. Every species they've attacked has either surrendered or been destroyed. They think war is a game, and they always win." She pressed a button, and new markers appeared on the display. Human ships. So many that they seemed to fill the screen with blue light. "They've never fought us before. They don't know what we are." Kelvos stared at the display. The scale of what he was seeing overwhelmed him. This wasn't a punitive expedition or a border skirmish. This was an invasion force. "You mean to conquer them?" he whispered. "No," Admiral Mitchell said. "We mean to break them. Conquest implies we want their territory. We don't. We want them to understand that killing human children has consequences. We want every species in this galaxy to see what happens when someone hurts our people. The Concord will not allow this," Kelvos said desperately. "They will intervene. They will stop you." Senator Hernandez shook his head. "The Concord can try. But by the time they organize a response, it will already be over. Human wars don't last long. We don't have the patience for them." "Doctor." Lynn handed Kelvos a data tablet. "These are our fleet specifications. Our weapons capabilities. Our strategic plans. We're giving them to you freely because we want you to understand something important." Kelvos looked at the data scrolling across the screen. The numbers made no sense. They couldn't be real. "This is impossible," he said. 40 years ago, you wrote a paper about humanity," Dr. Lynn said. "You called us gentle emotionalists who posed no threat to galactic stability. You said our attachment to family and art made us unsuited for serious military conflict." She leaned closer. "You were studying the face we choose to show the universe. You never saw what was behind it." Admiral Mitchell began issuing orders. Ships moved on the displays, forming into attack groups, preparing for departure. "Go back to your Concord," she told Kelvos. "Tell them what you've seen. Tell them that humanity is coming for the Vethrak, and nothing in this galaxy can stop us. Tell them to stay out of our way." Kelvos was escorted back to his transport in a daze. As his ship pulled away from Earth, he looked back at humanity's homeworld. It was a small blue planet, peaceful and beautiful, but the space around it was filled with death. Ships carrying weapons that could crack worlds. Soldiers prepared to kill and die, a civilization that had built the instruments of destruction while pretending to be harmless. He began composing his report to the Concord. His hands shook as he wrote. "They deceived us all. For 200 years, they smiled and traded and made friends while secretly preparing for war. They are not what we thought they were. They are not gentle. They are not weak. They are something far more dangerous. They are patient. And now their patience has ended. May the stars help anyone who stands in their way." The human fleet arrived at the Vethrak border 1 month after the destruction of the New Horizon. Kelvos had managed to secure a position aboard a Concorde observation vessel, watching from a safe distance as 300 human warships translated into enemy space simultaneously. The Vethrak had been warned. They had assembled their own fleet to meet the invasion. 80 ships commanded by Admiral Korax, the same officer who had ordered the attack on the civilian transport. He was confident. He had never lost a battle. His species had dominated this sector for 500 years. The battle lasted 4 hours. Kelvos watched from the observation deck as human ships tore through Vethrak defenses like fire through dry grass. They moved with impossible speed, appearing and disappearing, striking from angles that should not have been possible. Their weapons were unlike anything in the Concorde database, focused energy beams that cut through shields as if they did not exist, missiles that split into dozens of smaller projectiles, electronic attacks that left Vethrak ships dead and drifting. Captain Kevin Burke commanded the assault carrier Relentless. Kelvos managed to intercept communications from his ship during the battle. Burke's voice was calm, almost bored, as he directed his pilots through the enemy formation. Alpha Wing, target their command ship. Beta Wing, clean up the destroyers on the left flank. Gamma Wing, make sure nothing escapes to warn the homeworld. Captain, one of his officers reported, enemy vessels are attempting to surrender. There was a pause. When Burke spoke again, his voice had not changed. I don't see any white flags. Do you? No, sir. Then I guess they're still fighting. The Vethrak ships died. All of them. Not a single vessel was captured or allowed to escape. Admiral Korax's flagship was the last to fall, its hull torn open by concentrated fire from a dozen human ships at once. Kelvos felt sick. He had witnessed battles before. The Concorde races fought with rules and protocols. Surrender was always accepted. Prisoners were always taken. War was terrible, but it was civilized. The humans did not fight like civilized beings. They fought like predators, like hunters culling prey. After the battle, Kelvos was permitted to board a captured Vethrak military station. Human ground forces had taken it in less than an hour. He found Sergeant Maria Santos directing cleanup operations in the main control room. Santos was a small woman with dark hair pulled back tight and eyes that had seen too much. Kelvos learned later that she had been aboard a ship that escaped the same battle group that destroyed the New Horizon. She had watched the civilian transport die on her sensors while her captain ordered retreat. Sergeant, Kelvos said, I notice you are not taking prisoners. Santos looked at him. Her face showed nothing. The Vethrak didn't take prisoners from the New Horizon, she said. They didn't even let the escape pods launch. They shot them down one by one while the crew begged for mercy. But surely some of these soldiers were not involved in that attack. They wear the same uniform. They serve the same government. They had 200 years to rebel against leaders who murder children for sport. Santos turned back to her work. They made their choice. Now, they live with the consequences. Kelvos wanted to argue. He wanted to speak about justice and proportionality and the rules of civilized warfare. But he looked into Santos's empty eyes and knew that his words would mean nothing. The humans had not come here for justice. They had come for vengeance. And vengeance did not care about rules. Over the next 2 months, Kelvos documented the human advance through Vethrak space. System after system fell. Military bases were destroyed. Shipyards were reduced to debris. The Vethrak fleet, once the terror of the sector, was hunted down and eliminated ship by ship. The humans did not negotiate. They did not accept surrender. They did not pause to consolidate their gains or rest their troops. They simply kept coming, an endless tide of cold fury washing over everything in its path. Commander Laura Hayes and the Steadfast led several key assaults. Kelvos managed to speak with her once, during a brief lull between engagements. Commander, he asked, do you not feel anything? Guilt? Doubt? Anything at all? Hayes looked at him for a long moment. Her face was thinner than he remembered. Dark circles ringed her eyes. She had not slept properly in weeks. I feel everything, she said quietly. Every death. Every burning ship. Every soldier who will never go home to their family. I feel all of it. Then how do you continue? Because I also feel the 847 children who died on the New Horizon. I feel their mothers and fathers and brothers and sisters. I feel the empty chairs at dinner tables across human space. Her voice hardened. The Vethrak wanted to see what happens when you hurt humanity. This is what happens. We don't stop. We don't forgive. We don't forget. We just keep coming until there's nothing left to fight. And when it's over? Kelvos asked. When the Vethrak are defeated? What then? Hayes turned away from him. Then we go home. We hug our children. We try to remember how to be human again. She paused. Some of us will manage it. Some of us won't. That's the price we pay. The Vethrak High Council sent message after message to the Galactic Concord, begging for intervention. They called the humans monsters. They called them savages. They demanded that civilized species unite against this threat, but the Concord did nothing. They debated and discussed and formed committees. By the time they agreed on a response, the human fleet was already approaching the Vethrak homeworld. Admiral Korax was dead. His replacement, a younger officer named Threll, sent a desperate transmission to anyone who would listen. They cannot be stopped. They cannot be reasoned with. They do not want territory, or resources, or tribute. They want us to suffer. They want us to feel what we made them feel. And they will not stop until every last one of us understands exactly what we did when we killed their children. Kelvos included that transmission in his report to the Concord. He added his own observation at the bottom. The Vethrak finally understand what they awakened. Unfortunately for them, understanding has come far too late. The human fleet arrived at the Vethrak homeworld on a clear day in early spring. 14 billion Vethrak looked up at their sky and saw death hanging above them. 300 warships, their hulls scarred from months of battle, their weapons hot and ready. Behind them stretched the burning wreckage of an empire that had stood for 5 centuries. Kelvos watched from the observation deck of a Concord diplomatic vessel, kept at a safe distance by human escorts. His hands trembled as he recorded everything. He had witnessed the entire campaign, from the first shots at the border to this final moment. He had seen things that would haunt him for the rest of his long life. Now he waited to see if humanity would commit genocide. Admiral Grace Mitchell stood on the bridge of her flagship, the carrier, unconquered. She looked tired. They all looked tired. 3 months of constant warfare had worn down even the hardest soldiers, but their eyes remained cold. Their purpose remained clear. Admiral, her communications officer reported, the Vethrak High Council is requesting contact. They wish to discuss terms. Mitchell nodded slowly. Open a channel. Broadcast it on all frequencies. I want every Vethrak on that planet to hear this. The holographic display flickered to life, showing the faces of the Vethrak High Council. 7 leaders who had ruled their people with absolute authority for generations. They looked small now. Afraid, broken, humans. The eldest counselor said, his voice shaking. We beg you for mercy. We will give you anything. Credits. Territory. Technology. Our fleet is destroyed. Our military is shattered. We are no longer a threat to you. Please, stop this. Admiral Mitchell let the silence stretch. When she spoke, her voice carried across a world. 3 months ago, your Admiral Korax destroyed a civilian transport carrying 3,000 of our people. Families, children, teachers and farmers and doctors who wanted nothing but a peaceful life on a new world. He killed them all, and then he laughed about it. She stepped closer to the display. Since then, we have destroyed your fleet. We have burned your shipyards. We have killed more of your soldiers than I care to count. And through all of it, your government said nothing. No apology, no condemnation, no offer of justice. You watched your military murder our children, and you stayed silent. The counselors tried to speak, but Mitchell raised her hand. I have 300 ships above your world. Each one carries enough firepower to turn your cities to glass. I could give the order right now. And in 1 hour, 14 billion of your people would be dead. Your civilization would end. Your species would be reduced to scattered survivors on distant colonies, forever remembering the day they pushed humanity too far. The counselors were weeping now. Some had fallen to their knees. The eldest could barely speak. Please, he whispered. Please. We surrender. We accept any terms. Just spare our people. Admiral Mitchell closed her eyes. When she opened them again, something had changed. The cold fury was still there. But beneath it, Kelvos saw something else. Exhaustion. Grief. a terrible weariness that went beyond the physical. "We could destroy you," she said quietly. "Part of me wants to. Part of every human in this fleet wants to watch your world burn the way our children burned. You cannot imagine how much restraint it takes to stand here and not give that order." She took a deep breath. "But we are not you. We did not come here for genocide. We came here for justice." Mitchell outlined the terms. Unconditional surrender. All military assets to be destroyed or handed over. Complete dismantling of the Vethrak war machine. War crimes tribunals for every officer involved in attacks on civilians. Reparations to be paid for the next 300 years. Permanent human oversight of Vethrak military development. And one final condition. You will build a memorial on this world. Mitchell said. A monument. Listing every name of every person who died on the New Horizon. Every child. Every family. You will teach your children and your children's children what happened here. You will remember what your empire did and what it cost you. If future generations ever consider attacking innocent people again, they will look at that memorial and remember this day. The High Council accepted immediately. They would have accepted anything. As the surrender documents were transmitted, Kelvos noticed something strange. Throughout the human fleet, soldiers were beginning to react. The cold masks they had worn for months were cracking. Some sat down heavily, as if their legs could no longer support them. Others hugged their crewmates. Many were crying. He found Commander Laura Hayes sitting alone in a corridor of her damaged ship. The Steadfast had taken heavy fire in the final approach. Half her crew was dead. Hayes herself had refused medical treatment until everyone else was cared for. Now she sat with her back against the wall, tears streaming down her face. "Commander," Kelvos said softly. "Are you all right?" Hayes laughed bitterly. "No, I'm not all right. I don't think I'll ever be all right again." She looked up at him, with red-rimmed eyes. "Do you know what the worst part is? I don't regret any of it. I would do it all again to protect our people. And that terrifies me." "You showed mercy," Kelvos said. "You could have destroyed them. You didn't. Mercy." Hayes shook her head. "Is that what you call it? We killed millions of their soldiers. We burned their empire to the ground. We traumatized an entire generation of their children who will grow up seeing human ships as monsters from the void." She wiped her eyes. "We didn't show mercy. We just decided that destroying them completely would hurt us more than it would hurt them. We stopped because we didn't want to become what they were. That's not mercy. That's just survival. Holding on to enough of our humanity to recognize ourselves in the mirror." Kelvos sat down beside her. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. "What happens now?" he finally asked. "Now we go home," Hayes said quietly. "We bury our dead. We hold our families. We try to remember how to laugh and love and live like normal people." She paused. "Some of us will make it, some of us won't. The ones who can't will be honored and cared for, because they gave up their peace of mind to protect everyone else." She looked out the window at the Vethrak homeworld below. "And we'll hope that no one ever makes us do this again." 1 year after the end of the human Vethrak War, Kelvos stood before the assembled representatives of 200 species in the Great Hall of the Galactic Concord. His report had taken months to compile. Every observation, every interview, every moment of horror and wonder he had witnessed during humanity's campaign of vengeance. The hall was silent as he began to speak. "For 40 years, I studied humanity. I wrote papers about their emotional nature. I described them as gentle artists and devoted parents. I told this assembly that they posed no threat to galactic stability." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "I was wrong. Not about the facts, but about what those facts meant." He activated a holographic display showing human cultural achievements. Art, music, literature, images of families in parks, children playing, communities celebrating festivals. "This is real," Kelvos said. "The kindness, the creativity, the love. All of it is genuine. Humans truly are capable of extraordinary gentleness and compassion." The display changed. Now it showed the human war fleet, ships burning, soldiers fighting, cities falling. "This is also real. The violence, the fury, the capacity for destruction that exceeds anything in our records." Humans are capable of horrors that would make the most aggressive species in this Concord pause. He turned to face the assembly directly. For centuries, we believed these qualities were opposites. A species was either peaceful or violent, gentle or dangerous. We categorized every race we encountered into one group or the other. We were comfortable with this understanding. Kelvos shook his head slowly. Humanity proves that understanding was incomplete. They are not peaceful instead of violent. They are not gentle instead of dangerous. They are all of these things simultaneously, and that is what makes them unique in this galaxy. He pulled up records from human history. Wars, conflicts, atrocities committed against their own kind. The assembly stirred uncomfortably as the images scrolled past. Before they reached the stars, humans spent thousands of years fighting each other. They developed weapons capable of destroying their entire civilization. They used some of those weapons. They committed acts against each other that match the worst crimes any species has inflicted on another. The display shifted to show human peace movements, treaties, reconciliations, former enemies becoming allies. And yet, they survived. They did not destroy themselves. They found ways to move past their conflicts and build something better. They created art and music that celebrates love and forgiveness. They developed philosophies centered on compassion and understanding. Kelvos's voice grew softer. They did not do this because they were naturally peaceful. They did it because they knew exactly what they were capable of. And they chose to be better. Every day, every generation, they make that choice again. They look at their own history, their own darkness, and they deliberately turn toward the light. He paused to collect himself. The memories of what he had witnessed still troubled his dreams. When the Vethrak killed those children, humanity stopped choosing. For 3 months, they let themselves become what they had always been capable of becoming. They showed the galaxy the monster they keep locked away inside themselves. The display now showed the memorial on the Vethrak homeworld. A massive structure listing every name from the New Horizon. Humans and Vethrak standing together at its base. Some weeping, some silent, and then they stopped. With victory in their grasp, with the power to commit genocide, they chose mercy. Not because they had to. Not because anyone could have stopped them, but because destroying the Vethrak would have meant becoming something they did not want to be. A new image appeared. Ambassador Christine Palmer, humanity's representative to the Concord, speaking at a diplomatic function. Behind her, human soldiers laughed with former enemies. Children from both species played together, too young to understand the war their parents had fought. I have spent this past year trying to understand what I witnessed. I have spoken with human soldiers and civilians. I have studied their history and their philosophy. I have searched for answers that would help me explain them to you. Kelvos stepped back from the podium and looked out at the assembled representatives. Here is what I have learned. Humanity is not a monster. They are not angels either. They are something far more complicated and far more remarkable. They are a species that contains within itself the capacity for both infinite cruelty and infinite compassion. And they wake up every morning and choose which one to embrace. He thought of Commander Hayes and her grandchildren, of Admiral Mitchell and her exhausted soldiers, of Sergeant Santos and her empty eyes. They choose to be kind. They choose to create beauty. They choose to love their families and help strangers and build communities. These choices are not easy for them. They fight against their own nature constantly, but they make those choices anyway because they believe that what they could be is more important than what they are. The display showed one final image, a human child on a playground, laughing as she swung higher and higher, reaching for the sky. The Vethrak made a mistake that nearly cost them everything. They saw human kindness and assumed it meant weakness. They did not understand that humans are kind despite their strength, not because they lack it. Kelvos's voice carried clearly through the silent hall. Let this be a lesson to every species here. Humanity will trade with you. They will share their art and their ideas. They will help you in times of need and ask for nothing in return. They will be the best friends this galaxy has ever known. His expression hardened. But harm what they love, and they will show you no mercy. They will come for you with all the fury of a species that spent 10,000 years learning how to destroy. And they will not stop until you understand exactly what you have done. He gathered his notes and prepared to leave the podium. I no longer fear humanity. I admire them. I admire the constant struggle they wage against their own darkness. I admire the daily choice they make to be better than their worst impulses. He looked out at the assembly one final time. I only hope that we never give them a reason to stop choosing. 6 months later, Kelvos returned to his homeworld. He had retired from diplomatic service, unable to continue his work after what he had experienced. He spent his days in a small garden, tending plants and trying to find peace. One afternoon, he noticed a group of human exchange students visiting his city. They were young and bright and full of wonder, taking pictures of the alien architecture and eagerly trying local foods. One of them, a girl no older than 20, stopped to help an elderly Morellian who had dropped her packages. Kelvos watched the girl smile as she handed back the scattered items, watched the old woman thank her with genuine warmth, watched the two of them share a moment of simple kindness between strangers. He thought about the human warships he had seen darkening Vethrak skies. He thought about the cold fury in Commander Hayes's eyes. He thought about the memorial standing on a conquered world, and he understood, finally, what humanity truly was. They were the kindness in that young girl's smile. They were the wrath of those warships. They were both things at once, always, forever. The choice between them was not made once but constantly, in every moment, by every human alive. The galaxy had been lucky so far. Humanity had chosen to be friends. Kelvos hoped, with all his heart, that the galaxy would be wise enough to let them keep choosing.